and he did purchase this land here and build this townhouse for himself before the planners of the new town could construct the church that they wanted to put here. As I mentioned, the new town was meant to be symmetrical, so they were pretty annoyed when he started building this townhouse here, as they had plans to put one church on this side and one church on the very other side of the new town. You might be wondering what the big monument is on your right in the middle of St Andrew's Square. This is the Melville Monument. And the Melville Monument was built for and dedicated to a man named Henry Dundas. Yes, they were relatives. Now, Henry Dundas was the head of the Admiralty here in Great Britain, so he was in charge of the Navy's finances. He was the only person in this country to have ever been impeached. And it was said that that happened after an investigation into some missing money. Now, Henry Dundas was pretty famous for having lots of friends in powerful positions and being very influential himself. So he did, we would say, he was cleared of the impeachment that he received. And he did get offered earldom as a consolation for the embarrassment that he faced. However, he did not take it, and he never took any other seats in power again. In Edinburgh, we don't really like Henry Dundas. He did delay the abolishment of slavery by over 15 years because he was having that very large monument built for himself.
So this is St Andrew's Square?
This is St Andrew's Square, yes, named after the patron saint of Scotland. So for any fans of art on the bus today, in just a second, once we go through these traffic lights, if you look to your right, you're going to notice a gap or an alley in between these buildings. And if you look down that alley, you're going to see a big red stone building. And the big red stone building you're about to see is the National Portrait Gallery here in Edinburgh. Another free attraction that you can go and visit during your time here. The National Portrait Gallery is absolutely fabulous. They've got very early forms of portraiture on the very bottom floor, making your way up several floors to more modern forms of portraiture now. If you keep looking to your right, you'll see the very grand front of the National Portrait Gallery. So we're now on Queen Street, and if everybody looks to your left, we have these very grand townhouses. This street here gives you a very accurate representation of what the new town was meant to look like. Now, Georgian people, they absolutely loved to display their wealth in the forms of the fronts of their buildings. So, the more wealthy you were, the grander your entry was, and the more windows you had on the front of your building. Which is why you can see some of them are a little bit different from the rest, and that is because richer people did live there. And you might notice down on the left that we actually have a second entry at the basement level, and this was for your workers or servants to enter through. Now, there was a very famous man that lived here on Queen Street, and his name was James Young Simpson. James Young Simpson was the gentleman responsible for discovering the anaesthetic properties of chloroform. Now, he lived on number 52, which is going to be on your left-hand side, a blue door with a white surround. You're going to see it in just a second. James Young Simpson, he was very famous. He had lots of different parties with his socialite friends, and at these parties, they would sample different drugs. After one party of sampling chloroform, people at the party, they did knock themselves out for multiple hours. When they awoke, they collectively decided that this was fantastic and they needed to push it forward in the medical field. However, it didn't become very popular until Queen Victoria used it during the birth of her 8th child, and then it was said to have become quite trendy. James Young Simpson, he regularly went into the old town and gave free medical care to women and children in the poorer areas, which is why he was a very much loved man here in Edinburgh, and when he passed away, 100,000 people lined the streets of the new town here to watch his funeral procession go by. So this is us now coming into George Street. It's a very, very grand street here in the new town. This was meant to be the main residential street. However, during the Victorian period, they did come and kick everybody out of George Street, especially the bottom floors, and they turned these sections into things like townhouses and banks, etc., which is very prominent now in George Street. We've got lots of lovely restaurants here for high-end bites to eat and drink. And this street here is famously very wide. It was made this way on purpose so that horse and carriage could do one full loop turn in the road. Directly in front of us we have Charlotte Square. Charlotte Square is very important to us here in Edinburgh. It is the best preserved Georgian square anywhere in the world. We've managed to keep Charlotte Square so well preserved by keeping this one private. So the only way you can gain access to something like Charlotte Square is if you have a key. And to have a key you needed to have purchased one of the multi-million-pound properties that we're going to be seeing all around Charlotte Square. In the centre of Charlotte Square we have a statue in there, and it is of Prince Albert. Prince Albert was married to Queen Victoria, and when he passed away, she was in a very long public period of mourning. She didn't really get over it, we didn't expect her to, but they held a competition for somebody to sculpt this statue for her as a gift, and that was the gentleman I mentioned earlier, John Steele. It was said that Queen Victoria loved this statue so much she knighted him on the spot. And we're just approaching stop number 3, guys, if this is for Charlotte Square, if anybody would like to get off here. Now, this is another National Records Hall on your left-hand side. However, this is the National Record Hall for criminals here in Scotland, so I'm not sure you would want to go in there and look up your family name, just in case.
Is it the biggest one?
Maybe. So if you look to your right, you might notice some of the pavements here in Charlotte Square are raised. Now, Robert Adam, he designed these this way on purpose. Now, the lovely Georgian ladies of the time, they had very grand, luxurious, long skirts. And Robert Adam wanted to have one higher level of elegance here in Charlotte Square. So he raised the pavement so that those lovely women could be dropped off on a higher level as to not get their skirts very mucky on the ground. We used to hold the International Book Festival here in Charlotte Square for many years, but unfortunately it was said to be damaging the ground quite significantly. And as we know, this is the best preserved Georgian square, so we didn't enjoy the discovery of that very much. We had to move the International Book Festival into the Old Town, and I'll show you where we're going to be holding that once we get there on the second half of the tour.